My name is Lisa Connery. I'm the Director of Guidance here at Algonquin. I appreciate your patience. We thought we were all set with the new projector in the back, but you know, technology got the best of us here, but we were able to at least recover by getting a new projector. So tonight we're going to have, we have Lori Pelletier joining us from Massachusetts Educational Finance Authority, also known as Meifa. Meifa is a wonderful, wonderful resource for parents and students as they kind of embark on the journey of post-secondary education. So Lori has a jam-packed presentation. She's going to share a ton of information with you. And we'll hold questions to the end, but then I'll come around with the microphone and you guys will be able to, you know, ask her questions about the presentation. So before we get started, I think a couple key points are, you know, the counselors have been working with students. We just wrapped up another full day of workshops on Monday, going over the college, the common application and just applications in general with students. And so now we're beginning to start to have individual appointments where we're working with students to kind of assess where they're at in their process and to begin the early admissions process with students, okay? So all the counselors are working pretty diligently, meeting with students and, you know, kind of assessing everything. So an important conversation that really needs to happen, you have your students who are currently working on completing the actual application process. They're busy working on their counselor rec form and their teacher rec form and their resume and their applications and all of that. And then along with them, you know, is the financial aid component. And that is a significant part that you as parents can play in this process. We did in the workshops kind of go over some financial aid stuff with the students. We actually guided them through the process of going to one of their chosen school's websites and accessing the financial aid page, looking up deadlines, what's required for forms, because you will see that some schools will require the federal financial aid form, the FAFSA. Some will also, in addition, you know, require a private form called the CSS Profile or an institutional form, all right? So we did guide the students through how to access all of that information and record it and encourage them to be very proactive in researching what their dates and deadlines and requirements are for their schools. So we did walk through one school with them so that they understand the process and how to do that, okay? So as parents, I think it's really important that you take the opportunity to, you know, sit down and have a discussion with your student about finances. It is a huge investment, and I think it's great if you can have the conversation ahead of time as you're kind of working through the application process and determining what the final list for your student might look like. We've been encouraging students to make sure that they have a well-balanced list. And when we say well-balanced, we're saying we're looking for a couple reaches. We're definitely looking for a few target schools and also a couple safety schools. One important piece is also ensuring that you make sure you have a financial backup. For some people that may be, you know, a safety private school may end up being a great financial backup because the school, you know, your student's profile is higher than maybe the school's average, and so they may be wanting to recruit your students, so you may get a lot of merit money. All right, from a safety school for your student that then could also then be your financial backup. For many families, the state universities and colleges are also a great financial backup. So it's really about having that conversation ahead of time and assessing the list and making sure that it's well balanced, not just from an admissions standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint. You know, the schools also have what they call net price calculators on their websites, and I think it's important, you know, for students and parents to take an opportunity to go on to some of their chosen schools' websites and do the net price calculator. You can enter some basic information about your student and your family, and they will give you an estimate. And I think, Lori, you'll go over some of that too in your presentation about what the cost might look like for that institution. So it will actually give you a ballpark that you can utilize in assessing your overall list for your student. One thing that I would like to highlight is the scholarship process. We will begin right now. We're in the process of just applying to schools. So our goal right now is just to get students to understand the application process. And this looks really funny on here for some reason. I apologize. All right, here we go. I apologize. The view that's coming up here on Lori's screen is slightly different than our view that we have on our computers. So I'm trying to like pull up. Let's see. All right. Yeah, it's looking, all right, here we go. Okay, so under colleges, so one thing I'd like to highlight is the scholarship process. So we have not started the local scholarship process quite yet. We will have a couple scholarships, like the Corridor 9 scholarship, which will become available in early December. The bulk of the local scholarships will become available in February. We complete the entire scholarship process through Naviance, all right? We upload all of the available scholarships right onto Naviance so students can work on it independently at home. Parents can look up what scholarships are available as well. The criteria for the scholarship is listed, all right, along with the application. So everything you need in order to complete the scholarship process is available on Naviance. And you will see that the number of scholarships will increase significantly after the holidays, okay? Like I said, we will have a couple in December, and then after that, you will see it increase significantly. So if you go under the colleges tab, when you log into your Naviance account, you can just look under scholarships and money. And you will see scholarship list and scholarship application, all right, applications. There's actually nothing listed here right now. But like I said, it will grow significantly. Last year, I mean, that's where our students receive the bulk of their money is through local scholarships, okay? Last year, we gave out a little over $100,000 in scholarships at the senior awards night, you know, so it is beneficial for your student to take some time and to look through the available scholarships and applications that are going to be in there. And then once they complete that process, they can take their application down to the Career Resource Center, where our CRC coordinator will process everything. So if they need transcripts or letters or anything else to go along with their application, we will provide that. And we also, for the applications that are on Naviance, we also put the package together and then we send it off to the scholarship committee. Okay, so we'll handle all of that. Really all you and your student need to do is make sure that you're regularly logging in to look, because we will on a regular basis be uploading new scholarships. I always encourage students, like, log on the weekend, Saturday or Sunday morning, hop up, right? Go in, is there anything new on there? Am I qualified? Do I fit the criteria for this scholarship? Is this something that I would like to complete, and what do I need to do in order to complete it, okay? So it's like that quick, like 10, 15-minute glance at, you know, what's been added on here and what do I need to do in order to complete this scholarship process, okay? There's also on here, if we were to go back, there's also national searches that you can do, like through FastWeb. You know, so if you want to look at other scholarships that might be available for students, right there under the same page for scholarships is the national search. You just click on it and you just click off some buttons pertaining to your student. They'll ask you some demographics and some academic information, and then you can go ahead and submit, and they will match some scholarships with your student based on the criteria that you have put in there. Okay? So a lot of this stuff is available online, and really easy for your students to access, and we're always happy to answer questions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this. We will send out information in January, just kind of reminding everyone, like, the scholarships are becoming available, this is the process, this is where you can access the information, just a little prompt for everybody, and if you have any questions, you know, feel free to reach out to your student's counselor. I'm actually going to hand this off to Lori and let her spend the bulk of the time talking, as this is her area of expertise. And so welcome, Lori. It's nice to see you again this year.
It's very nice to be here. Thank you to the guidance office for inviting me back. I did the math today. I've been doing financial aid for 29 years, and I don't know how that's possible since I'm only 28 years old. But, and I've been here several times, but I love these financial aid nights because there's so much misinformation out there. How much have you heard from other parents, from your hairdresser, from your mechanic, from your neighbor, from your cousin? and all that you hear just scares you. So hopefully tonight you'll get just the facts and be able to leave here. You may not be any wealthier when you leave here, but at least you'll know what your situation is. I wanted to point out the handouts. They are on the table outside. If you know anyone who couldn't be here tonight, you can pick them up for them. We have extras. This is a copy of all the slides that I'll be referring to, which should take about 40, 45 minutes. We'll have plenty of time for questions. And then this handout is doesn't go in exact order of the slides, but it's just some basic information, some terminology, some timelines. It's helpful information to refer to. There's some great websites listed on there. And I wanted to point out, this is a survey of how did you like the information that you learned tonight, but also if you want to get on the mailing list for Meifa, you can fill out the top part and you'll be on their email distribution. Even if you have a sophomore or a junior, in high school, getting on the distribution list means you'll be getting emails from Meifa saying, you know, okay, they're a junior, did they take the SATs, have they done a college list, just little prompts, 1 or 2 emails a month. They're not going to sell your name or email address to anybody else. I'm going to try to do this with holding the microphone in one hand and my clicker in the other, so we'll see how this goes. And bring up the first slide. So as Lisa mentioned, I'm here representing Meifa. Meifa is a nonprofit organization in Massachusetts. You may have heard of them if you have a 529 plan in Massachusetts, like the U plan or the U Fund. It's managed by Meifa and Fidelity. Meifa also has a loan that they offer to families. If you 6, 8 months from now looking for a loan to pay for college, Meifa has a loan. But mostly what we do are these high school nights, and we have a very thorough website that gives you all the information you need, and a lot of webinars on the website if you want to get a presentation, links to other resources. There's so much information online, but Meifa.org is like a one-stop shop where you could get all your information starting from there, so you know you're only getting legitimate information. Tonight's topics, we're going to talk a little bit about the different types and sources of financial aid. We're going to review the application process. We're going to understand how financial aid decisions are made at the college level, and then we'll learn about other options besides financial aid to pay for college, and lastly, we'll share with you some free resources that are available. So as far as types and sources of aid, there's 3 main types. The first one is scholarships and grants. That's free money, that's gift money, that's the good stuff you want to get the most of. Typically, a grant is given to a student because they financially need the money. And a grant can come from a lot of different places, but it's usually based on the financial need of the family. Whereas a scholarship is based on some achievement of the student or to reward the student, so you might get an athletic scholarship or an artistic scholarship or an academic scholarship. But either way, it's free money that reduces the price of the school. Federal work study is another big type of aid that you might see for your child. Work study is a part-time job on campus where the student works usually about 10, 12 hours a week, gets minimum wage. There's lots of different jobs across the campus, in the library, in the gym, in the cafeteria, in the admissions office. A college could not run without their work study students. And I know you're all thinking, my child's going to be studying 100% of the time and doesn't have time to work. That's really not true. So they can work their work-study job on the weekends, on nights, or even just in between their classes. Their class schedule for college is much different than a high school schedule. So they have a lot of downtime. And if your kids are anything like my kids, they need to be structured. They're used to a structure and a schedule and being busy, so having too much downtime is a bad thing. Work-study money is given to the student in a paycheck. So they work their hours. There are jobs set aside, but the student still needs to go and find the job that's right for them, work the hours, and get a paycheck. They can use that paycheck to buy books and supplies and a sweatshirt and concert tickets, pizza, beer, whatever they're going to buy with their money. But it helps you so you don't have to keep sending them money to live off of. It helps their summer earnings last a little longer. And it keeps them busy. And at some point, usually later, like sophomore, junior, senior year, they might even get a work-study job that's related to their career choice. So it might, if they're a chemistry major, maybe there's a job in the chemistry lab for a work-study student, so they could get something related to what they're studying. And then federal student loans, unfortunately, are a big part of the financial aid process, and we'll talk about those in depth, but it's basically a loan in the student's name that they pay back after graduation. So how does financial aid break down? These numbers are back from 2017, 2018. You can see the different types of aid there and the percentage of money that was given out. The good news is it was $184 billion of different types of money given out, but the biggest portion of that is federal student loans. But the next biggest parts are the institutional grants and scholarships and federal grants. So although loans are a big part of it, so are scholarships and grants, and it's kind of a balancing act. So where does this money come from? The money comes from the federal government. Our federal tax dollars goes into a budget where the federal government sets aside money to award to students. I'd say 99% of the federal money that goes to the students is based on financial need. So it's more of an assessment of the family's finances. They might qualify for federal aid. It includes grants, work-study, student loans, and that website, studentaid.gov, does a great explanation of all of that. So that's why you fill out the FAFSA form, the free application for federal student aid. That will see what federal aid you qualify for. The state of Massachusetts also offers money to its residents who qualify. Again, when you fill out the FAFSA form, you're going to list that you're a Massachusetts resident. That's all you need to do. Your data will be sent to the state office, and they will see if you qualify for a Massachusetts state grant. They also have scholarships. You may have heard of the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship. That comes from the state. They have tuition waivers and a small loan program. And so you may receive something from the state of Massachusetts questioning your FAFSA form or your status or what school your child's going to go to. You want to make sure you're looking at that information because it could mean that you qualify for money from the state. And then the college or university has their own money to give. Every school has different amounts. Harvard or MIT has a different amount of money than, say, Becker College or Quinsigamond Community College. Every school has different amounts. I've worked at different colleges, and honestly, it's very hard to work at a school in the financial aid office if they don't have a lot of money to give out. It's really hard to decide who's going to get what little money you have. So each school is going to send you a different financial aid offer because they have different amounts of money to give, and they decide who they give their money to. The federal and the state money is given based on criteria that is set by the government, whereas the schools can give out their money however they wish. Most of the money that schools offer is in the form of grants and scholarships. Occasionally, a school might have a loan that they give. And then there are other agencies that offer money. Like Lisa was mentioning in the beginning, there are local scholarships that give out money, like the PTA scholarship. But you have to go out and find those. When you apply for financial aid, you're only applying for federal, state, and institutional. All these outside agencies, it's a different search, it's different applications, often, a different application for every single scholarship. But don't miss that opportunity. That's another way to get some additional funding. So check with your employer, check with your bank, your place of worship, your credit union, and then definitely Naviance in the guidance office will have the local scholarships. There are national scholarships that are offered as well. Coca-Cola is a big one. They offer $20,000 a year for 4 years. But it's so competitive because almost every kid across the country who thinks they have a shot at it is applying. So they're getting tens of thousands of applications. You have a better chance of getting the local scholarships. You're only kind of competing against each other. And most scholarship committees try to spread the money around so the money doesn't all go to the valedictorian. It goes to a variety of students for a variety of reasons. So don't miss those outside agencies as well. So to talk about the student loans first, we'll get the bad news out of the way first. The federal student loan is something the student can get just by being a US citizen, going to college, and filling out the FAFSA form. And they can borrow a certain amount every year. The student is the borrower, there's no cosigner, there's no credit check. Even if the student's only 17 years old or 16 years old, they can still get a student loan if they meet the other criteria. However, the amount they can borrow is limited by the government. They set an amount that a student can borrow each year of college. Freshman year is $5,500, sophomore year is $6,500, junior and senior year is $7,500. So usually over a 4-year college degree, kids are borrowing about $27,000 a year. Their payments on that are about $300 a month for 10 years. And I know you're all thinking, well, what about all this information I hear in the news of people with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt? It's called interest accrual because they put them on hold and then they don't pay them and then the interest accrues. Plus, if a student goes to graduate school or gets their master's degree, they can borrow a lot more. But from the federal student loan program, a student in a bachelor's degree program, this is the maximum that they can borrow. Some of the loan can be subsidized, meaning interest-free, while they go to school. You have to show that you qualify for financial aid from the FAFSA form to get the interest-free loan. In that situation, it would be interest-free until 6 months after the student graduates. When they enter repayment, interest would start accruing. If you don't qualify for financial aid, if the family's finances are too high, they can still borrow the loan, but it will be accruing interest while the student goes to school. Right now, the interest rate is about 4%. You can choose to pay the interest while the student's in school so that it doesn't accrue and capitalize. A lot of families always ask me, you know, I have a 529 plan or we've saved enough for the first 2 years, so we're not going to take the loan. You may want to think about taking the loan to spread out your savings a little longer. The loan doesn't change how much you're paying, it just changes when you pay. You're going to pay after they graduate. You can help your student pay their loan back. And if you have several children and this is your first going off to college, I would recommend having the first one take it, because you don't want to get to that second or third kid and make them take the loan, and they're going to say, well, how come she didn't have to take it when she went 2 years ago? So you may want to start off and just have all your kids take the loan, and maybe you can decide later whether you help them pay it back or not. But it is a great way to have the student earn a credit history. Some people think it gives them more skin in the game and they perform better at college. I have 3 kids, they all had loans. I can't tell you that that's true, but you can try it and see. So anyways, that's the federal direct student loan. You will probably all see it on your financial aid awards if you file the FAFSA form. So merit-based aid, we're gonna shift now a little bit. Merit-based aid is basically scholarships. And scholarships are where you can get money offered to you regardless of your financial situation. And as Lisa was mentioning in the beginning, you may want to find enough safety or no-problem schools to apply to that might offer you a scholarship as an enticement to enroll. I worked at Anna Maria College. Our average students were a B student. So if we had a student come through the door with a 3.75 or a 3.9 GPA, we would automatically $8,000 scholarship. We would go with their acceptance letter because we wanted them to come, we wanted them to choose us, we wanted them to bring up our averages. And we knew that a student like that would be successful and, you know, enhance the classroom situation. So schools will do that. So it's a matter of finding the schools where your child stands out in the applicant pool. The nice thing about these merit scholarships is they can be any amounts. The amount I've been seeing lately from the private colleges is usually about $20,000 a year. Some of them are higher, again, depending on how much the student stands out. I see them more frequently from the private colleges because those schools cost more than the public in-state or out-of-state. And the private colleges have more funding and they have more flexibility of what they do with their funding. The state-sponsored schools like UMass Amherst or University of Connecticut, they have state overlay that prohibits them from spending their money whichever way they want. So they're a little less generous with their merit aid. But if you do get offered, it usually comes with the acceptance letter. Congratulations, you're accepted. We think you're such an excellent student. We'd like to offer you $20,000 a year for 4 years, and you must maintain a certain grade point average to keep it. I have to share, my son went to Northeastern. He had a small scholarship of about $10,000. It had a 3.0 GPA requirement. At the end of freshman year, he had a 2.97. So it's every parent's nightmare, right? So, but it wasn't his fault. It was the professor's, miscommunication or something. So, gotta love him. So, anyways, so what you want to do at this time of year, as your child's putting their list together of schools, you want to check, does their school offer Merit Aid? Keep in mind the Ivy League schools do not. So Harvard, Yale, Princeton, MIT, Holy Cross, Bowdoin, Bates, Amherst, Williams, they do not offer Merit Aid because they get the cream of the crop students from around the world without putting any money on the table. It's an honor to be accepted. Those schools are very generous with their need-based aid, but merit-based aid they don't offer. So check the schools, do they offer it? What's the requirements? I'd say 95% of the time all you have to do is apply for admission on time. A couple schools will say you have to apply early action. Some may have an extra essay or come in for an interview. But it is a great way to get a discount, especially once we start going through the numbers. Some of you in the audience are going to say, yeah, we're not going to qualify for need-based aid. Our income is too high. Well, you can still get a discount with Merit Aid, and it's a good way to get that. So need-based aid. Need-based aid is given to a student based on the family's financial circumstances. You're eligible for it based on a standardized formula that the federal government has set up and that the colleges follow. Grants, work study, and federal student loans are given out based on need basis. Most financial aid out there is based on need. So when we talk about financial aid, it's need-based. When we talk about scholarships, it's merit-based. And in order to keep your need-based aid, a student has to maintain satisfactory academic progress. They have to be working towards a degree. Usually means like a 2.0 GPA and passing like half of their classes. So how do you apply for need-based aid? Well, every school is a little different. They have their own requirements and their own deadline dates. They don't really make it easy. So again, you need to check your schools. What do they require? What are the deadline dates? The earliest deadline date I've been seeing is November 15th. If you're applying early decision or early action, November 15th might be your deadline date for applying for financial aid. You want to look at those deadline dates. I know that NYU in New York City, very popular school for kids these days, they have a very strict deadline date. If you apply after the deadline date, you get no financial aid for all 4 years. They are very inflexible. So you really want to look and see and make sure. But if you get your applications done in the month of October, you'll be fine. I've never seen any schools with a date before November 1st. So there is a spot on Meifa's website to keep you organized. It's called an application manager. So when my kids, I had twins that went through, and when I did that, I set up Excel spreadsheets, and I had file folders for each of the schools. You got to stay organized and on top of it. And some people push it off on the child to be responsible, but they're also responsible for every aspect of the admission application. So you just might want to check in, because the financial applications kind of have a bigger impact on mom and dad than on the student. So the primary application, and you've probably heard it a million times, is the FAFSA form. All schools require the FAFSA form. So no matter where you're applying, you're going to fill that out for those schools. It's online. It stands for free, meaning it's free to fill out, doesn't cost you anything. Application for federal student aid. It also will get you any state aid from Massachusetts. And a majority of colleges, it will get you any college, or institutional aid as well. UMass Amherst, Worcester State, Becker, Anna Maria, those schools, that's all they require is the FAFSA form. So that you, depending on the schools on your list, you may only be filling out the FAFSA form. It becomes available October 1st. If you jumped on the website today, what you would see is last year's form. And you'd be filling out the wrong form, and your application would be incomplete. In order to complete the form, both the student and one parent need an FSA ID, a Federal Student Aid Identification Number. If you have older children and you've done this before, you can use your FSA ID that you used for the older children. So it's a customized login that you're going to create for yourself based on your name, date of birth, and social security number. Your student is going to need one as well. That's how you log into the form, and that's how you sign and submit the form. As I said, only one parent needs the form, needs the FSA ID. The student will use it year after year. If you have other children, you can use yours to sign their forms as well. You do have to fill out the FAFSA form every year. So financial aid is something that is determined on a year-by-year basis based on your income, your family size, your assets as of the year they're collecting the data. If your child's graduating in 2020, so they're a high school senior right now, it's your 2018 tax return that they're looking at on the FAFSA form. The FAFSA form has a way to collect your IRS tax return data automatically. So when you get to the parent income section, it's going to ask you, did you file taxes? You say yes. Can we access them through IRS? You say yes. It will leave the form, go to the IRS website, pull your data. You won't see what they're pulling over. It will like exit out, but it will be the correct numbers from your 2018 federal tax return. You may, when you're filling it out, you may want that tax return and your W-2s in front of you because it collects both taxable and untaxed income. One of the biggest data elements that families miss is the untaxed income portion. So if you receive child support or you contribute pre-tax dollars out of your paycheck to your 401k or 403b, that's untaxed income. It doesn't make it to your tax return. They do want to know about that, so that comes off of your W-2 form. So that's most of the data that goes on there. Included on the form is, is the student a U.S. citizen, yes or no? And then they want to know what colleges you're applying to. The nice thing about the FAFSA form is you fill it out once and it goes to all the schools on your list. However, right now they only allow you to list 10 schools. So how many of you are looking at more than 10 schools? Yeah, quite a few. It's pretty common nowadays. So for those of you with more than 10 schools, you're going to have to figure out which 10 you want it to go to first. You hit submit, it gets processed, and about 3 days later you'll get a confirmation email that it's been processed. That means you can go back in and make a correction. You go back into the schools section, you make a correction by removing a couple of the schools and adding the schools that you want to add on there. A lot of kids are applying early nowadays, but maybe you apply to some early action schools in October, November, and then around December or January you realize there's a couple other schools you want to add to your list. You can go ahead and do that by making a correction to the FAFSA form. So as long as you wait those couple of days for it to be processed, at that point you can go back in and make any corrections to the form that you need to make. The other big question we get is about the parents. Which parents' data do we put on there? If mom and dad are married, then both parents go on there. If mom and dad are divorced, but the custodial parent, the parent the child lives with the most, is remarried, then it's that parent and the step-parent. If mom and dad never got married, but still live together, it's both parents. So it can be a little confusing, but the biggest question first is who did the child live with the most in the previous 12 months? That's who is the custodial parent. It's not on the legal documents from the divorce or separation. It's basically who they lived with. If that is 50-50, where the child spent half the time with mom and half the time with dad, then it goes to who provided more financial support, and that's who would fill out the form. So if you're in a divorced or separated situation, you need to figure that out before you start filling out the FAFSA form for who's going to fill it out. The other big question is how many people are in your household and how many children in your household are going to college. So if you have an older child who's taking, part-time classes at the community college, but they're, under 24 and they're taking more than 2 classes a semester, you can count that child as in college as well. Don't forget to count if you're taking care of elderly grandparents or a grandchild. Look at your whole family, who are you supporting, and list them on there. The other information that goes on there, like I said, is your 2018 income from your federal tax return, both taxable and untaxed income, and then your assets. The good news tonight that you can all take home is that your retirement savings, your life insurance policies, and your home equity for the home you live in are not reported on the FAFSA form. So that's what's not reported. What is reported is cash, checking, savings accounts, 529 plans you might have for all your children get reported on the FAFSA form as a parent's investment. And then if you have a small business, that's usually not reported unless you have more than 100 employees. If you have stock options, you have to figure out the value of those stocks and report those as an asset of the parent. If the child has any trust funds or savings bonds that are in the child's name, that gets reported as a child's asset. And then the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that your expenses do not go on the form. So credit card debt, your mortgage, your car loans, that's not reported anywhere. It's just how much money is coming into the family, how much money do they have in the bank, non-retirement assets, and then how many people does that cover. So the other applications you might see are mostly the CSS Profile form. The profile form is put out by the College Board, the same people who put out the SAT testing. It's on their website, collegeboard.org. It is not free. It does cost a little bit of money to fill it out. There's about 300 colleges that require it, but I think 90% of them are in Massachusetts or New England. So Holy Cross, Clark, WPI, Boston College, Boston University. So that level of school, the more expensive, more selective private schools collect the CSS profile. So if you're not sure, you need to check 100%, do I need to do it for this school? It's the same thing as the FAFSA. When you start it out, there's a registration form and you list what colleges you want the data sent to. So you'll have to know which of the schools on your list, but again, you only fill it out once. The big difference between the two forms is that the CSS profile form does include your home equity for your primary residence. They're going to ask you what it's worth and what you owe against it, how long you've owned it, things like that. These schools that are requiring this form think your home equity is part of your assets and should be included. Whereas the schools that don't require the form don't even look at that number. The other big difference is if you're divorced or separated, the CSS profile form will capture non-custodial parent information. So both parents will have to, and in some cases all 4 parents will have to fill out the CSS profile form. Some schools, it's rare, but occasionally you'll come across a school that has their own financial aid application. They want to capture some data, but they don't want to pay the money to use the CSS profile, so they'll have their own application. So again, you need to check with each school, see what their requirements are and what their deadline dates are. So after you apply, you do these applications online. After you apply, you'll get email confirmations that they've been processed and sent. They get sent electronically to the schools on your list. You'll get a confirmation of what was sent so you can go back and look it over, make sure that you didn't make any mistakes and add a couple zeros to your income or anything. If you have special circumstances, there's nowhere on these forms to report it, so you need to contact the school. So if you have, an elderly parent that you're supporting, you have excessive medical bills, or you were out of work for 2 or 3 years and finally got employed again in 2018, and you're playing catch up. So there's a lot of different circumstances that you could spell out to the financial aid office to try to get you a little more money, get them to look at your financial picture in a different light. Medical expenses is the biggest one that I see schools accepting. The other one is if you're paying for private tuition for younger siblings. So if your college-bound high school senior has younger siblings who are enrolled in a private school that you're paying tuition for, you can tell them about that so that they can factor that in. But they won't know about it if you don't tell them, so you definitely want to make them aware. The colleges may request more information from you. So submitting it, you might think you're done, but you might get something back saying they want more information. The important thing is they're going to contact the student. The student is the customer of the college. as crazy as that sounds. So the student might be getting emails or letters from the college. You need to know what's going on, make sure they're opening those and responding to them. A lot of the schools that use the CSS Profile form have this thing called IDOC. IDOC is where you upload your tax returns and W-2s to this website that the colleges will pull the data from. So if you're applying to, say, Bentley, Brandeis, and Babson, all the B schools, they all use IDOC, and they could upload it once, and those schools can pull from there. So you might see something from the school that says, you know, load your stuff onto this website. That's what they're doing. They want to go through your tax returns and W-2 with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that they're not missing anything. So unfortunately, if you want the money, you've got to follow the rules and submit the requests. So some people will get selected for verification. Verification is the federal process of randomly selecting a couple FAFSA forms and requiring that kind of backup data. So that might happen to you where you have to fill out a verification worksheet, submit your tax return, and they may ask about your assets. If you have a lot of interest income on your tax return, but you didn't report a lot of money in your assets, schools may catch that and say, how can you have capital gains and interest income if you have zero assets? So that's another reason why they might select you for verification and ask for documentation. All right, so you've applied for admission, you've applied for financial aid, then what happens? So the college will review the financial aid applications for those students who are accepted and try to figure out how much money you need to be able to afford their school. When they're looking at how much you need for their school, they look at the total cost for 1 year. It's called the cost of attendance budget. It includes tuition and fees, room and board, books, supplies, transportation, personal expenses, and they add that all up and it becomes your cost of attendance budget. Your cost of attendance budget is going to be different from one school to another because they all have different price tags. When you're filling out the FAFSA and the profile form, it's going to ask you, okay, if you come to our school, are you going to live on campus or off campus or with your parents? So they'll use that information to determine what your room and board charges are. If you say you're going to live on campus, they know how much a freshman pays for a dormitory and a meal plan, and they'll factor that in. They have an estimate of what it costs. So the yellow boxes here are estimates. And the yellow boxes are not something you're going to pay the college. That's money that you're going to pay to the bookstore or to Amazon or to Staples or Bed Bath & Beyond or wherever you're buying these things. But they just want to make you aware that these expenses are coming along and are factored into the total cost and can be factored into how much financial aid you receive. So the other part of the financial aid equation is called your expected family contribution, or EFC. Your EFC is the dollar amount the federal government thinks that your family can afford for 1 year for one child based on what you put on the FAFSA form. They don't think you can pull it out of your pocket. It's more like an assessment of your net worth of what you might be able to borrow. The assumption is that the family has the primary responsibility to pay for college before any additional funding is given. So what can you afford? Okay, let's put that on the table. Okay, now we'll try to help you with grants and loans and work study. There's an EFC calculator on Meifa.org. If you have a high school senior, you're going to know what your EFC is in just a couple months or a couple weeks when you fill out the FAFSA form. It will tell you what your expected family contribution is in the results of your FAFSA form. But if you have a junior or a sophomore, you may want to do the EFC calculator. It's pretty handy. It's nice, too, if you have different scenarios. So if you have a high school senior and a high school junior, you may want to do an EFC calculator, see, okay, well, this is what they think I can afford this year, the first year with the oldest one going. But next year, when I have 2 in college, how's that going to affect me? It usually splits your expected family contribution in half. So in a scenario where you have a high school senior and they're going to, let's say, UMass Amherst, which costs about $25,000 a year, if your expected family contribution was $30,000, that student wouldn't get any need-based financial aid because they think you can pay the full thing out of pocket. But the next year, when you have 2 kids going off, instead of $30,000, they're going to think you can afford $15,000 for one and $15,000 for the other. So the older one might get some more money at UMass Amherst, and then the younger one might get money where they go. So that's why I like the EFC calculator. It can also, you know, what if we pay off our house? What if I take this new job? What if I get a good bonus? How is that going to affect? Again, for your high school senior, it's your 2018 tax return that's going to be calculating your expected family contribution. The other calculator that's available is the net price calculators. Lisa mentioned this in the beginning. Years ago, we didn't have these. I'm so happy that schools are required now to have a net price calculator on their college website. So if you're worried about the price of some of your schools that your child's looking at, go to the college website, search for net price calculator, answer the questions. It won't tell you whether your child will be accepted, but it will tell you that if they get accepted, this is what they would get for financial aid, and this is what you would be required to pay after that. So they're pretty accurate and a good use of your time. So the financial aid formula is the cost of attendance for the school minus your expected family contribution equals your financial aid eligibility. Another way to look at this is that in order to be eligible for need-based aid, your expected family contribution has to be below the price of the school. Not just the tuition, but the total cost. So let's talk about your assets and how they might impact your expected family contribution. I've met lots of families over the years who said, you know what, I'm not going to save, or I haven't saved for college because I don't want to have money in the bank. It's going to hurt me, and I'm not going to get any financial aid when the time comes. Well, this chart here kind of shows you the opposite. Here we have 3 different families, but they happen to have the same income, $75,000 a year. But each one has a different amount of money in their assets. These numbers were based on a family of 4 with 1 child in college. So for family A with 0 in the bank, they have an expected family contribution of $7,000. For family B with $75,000 in the bank, they have an EFC of $10,000, not much higher than the first one. And then for family C, they have quite a bit of money in the bank, but their EFC just went up another $4,000. So parents' assets, money that the parent has in their name, including 529 plans, stock options, cash, checking, savings, factor into the whole equation at about a 5% assessment. So if you have $100,000 in the bank, that's going to reduce your eligibility for need-based aid by $5,000. So it's about 5% of your assets. Student assets, on the other hand, are assessed at about 20%. So the government thinks if the child has money in their name, that money should be used for college. We're going to assess it at a higher rate. So student money, student assets factor in a little higher. Now, your income is really what affects the expected family contribution. So again, we have 3 different families, family A, B, and C, and they range from $75,000 in income to $100,000 to $150,000. They all have $50,000 in assets, but their EFC ranges from $9,000 for family A all the way up to $33,000 for family C. And I know what you're all thinking. You're like, what is the cutoff? At what point do I make too much money that my EFC is going to be higher than any of these schools? Right now, for a family of 4 with 1 in college, it's about $300,000. If the parent's income is $300,000 or more, even at an expensive private school that might cost about $75,000 a year, your expected family contribution is going to be right up there, $75,000 to $80,000 a year. Okay, I just depressed everybody, so. But those are the facts, that's why you're here, that's what you want to know. So then you have to come to the agreement, like, at what point do we decide we're not going to apply for aid, right? I get that question all the time. You know, our incomes, you know, with bonuses and overtime and everything, we're 320 or whatever. You can still apply, and you could even appeal to the school and say, you know what, a lot of that income was a bonus. I don't know if I'm going to get the bonus in 2019 or 2020. That was 2018, things were different. So that's one way to look at it. The other way is if you want the student to take the federal student loan, you have to do the FAFSA form. You don't have to do it right now, but you have to do the FAFSA form at some point in order for the student to borrow the student loan. The other factor is that this FAFSA form is based on your 2018 tax return. By the time your child steps foot on campus, it's September of 2020. A lot can change. So if you want to have a financial aid application on file in case you lose your job or things change and your income goes down, it's much easier to go back to the school and appeal and say, you know what, we applied, we didn't get anything, but now things are different, if you have an application on file. And if you don't have an application on file, you can still appeal, but it's just going to be a little bit more burdensome. So it's a decision you have to make as a family, and that's where those net price calculators come in handy too. If you're getting back from every school on your list that you're not going to qualify for any financial aid, then you can decide, well, we're going to skip the aid process and we're going to look for merit aid. So how does that formula work in the real world, in the financial aid office? So here we have a student who has an expected family contribution of $5,000, but they're looking at 4 very different schools. The College A is a very expensive private school at $70,000 a year. College B is about $45,000. College C is at $30,000, and College D is right around $10,000. As there are schools out there at all different price ranges. But what stays the same is the family's expected contribution. So at College A, that student could qualify for $65,000 worth of need-based aid. And that does happen usually at, you know, a Holy Cross, Harvard, MIT, Brown, schools like that. They have that kind of money. They would fill in your whole gap. And majority of it, 95% of it, would be in grants. College B could also give you $35,000 worth of aid. So you don't know until you apply. We used to be able to say that all the time, but now with the net price calculator, you can kind of know a little bit before you apply. So in the financial aid office, they're reviewing every student who's been accepted and submitted their application. They're looking at their expected family contribution, and they're sending out financial aid awards. The financial aid awards come as early as December and as late as April. If you're applying early action or early decision, you're going to get some schools with early action are sending out their information in December. But you should know by April 1st from every school you've applied to whether you're accepted or not and how much money they're offering. So in this scenario, we're using an example where the school cost of attendance, the total cost was $45,000. It's kind of like an out-of-state public school, cost about $45,000 a year. The family has an expected family contribution of $5,000, so that goes in first. Then the school offered a grant and a scholarship, pretty big ones, but the barrel, the cylinder is still not full. They offered the federal student loan for $5,500. And then they offered work study for $2,000 for the year. But they have nothing left to offer. They've got grants, scholarships, loans, work study. They've looked to the federal government, the state government, and the college itself, and they don't have any other funds to give. So in this scenario, the family would have to come up with their $5,000 expected contribution, $5,500 in unmet need, so now they're up to $10,500. The student would have to pay back $5,500 in their student loan after they graduate, and the student would have to work enough hours to earn $2,000 over the year to help buy some of those expenses that are part of that $45,000. And this happens to every student at every college who's been accepted and filled out the financial aid application. So come April and you're sitting at the dining room table and you've got them all splayed out, you have to compare all the different offers and make a decision. So sometimes it's very hard. I know when my kids went through it, it was a pretty tough decision. My son and I were down to 2 schools and we had it all laid out semester by semester and we were trying to figure it out. Couldn't decide right up to May 1st. So here we have an example with 3 schools, College A, B, and C. They happen to cost the same, $45,000. But you can see they've given different amounts. And this is, you might see this, so that The grants and scholarships range from $17,000 at College C up to $32,000 at College A. In my experience, mom and dad are going to love College A, and the student's going to love College C, and you might have to come to an agreement that College B is the best choice. But you have to just be prepared that they're not all going to give you the same amount, and you're going to have to decide, is College C worth it? The other thing you can do at this point in time is you can go back to the school. You could go back to College C and say, you know what, we've been to visit twice. We love your school. We really want to go here, but we have better offers from other schools. We call it negotiating. The colleges hate that term, but you're just asking them for a review. Can you just look at this again? They've worked hard. The college has worked hard at recruiting your son or daughter at this point. And like I said, you've been to visit, you've gotten all these emails and pretty pictures and all the books and everything. They don't want to lose you at this point in the game. They've got you so close to saying yes. In my experience, it's the private schools who bend a little bit more than the public schools. And they usually bend about $2,000 to $3,000. So you can call the school and say, listen, we have a better offer from an XYZ school down the street, but you're my first choice. I really want to come. And they might come back a week or two later and say, you know what, we have $2,000 more per year in a scholarship we can give you. One phone call, a couple $1,000. So don't forget that process. If you are in a situation where you have schools, in my mind, I always use Merrimack, Stonehill, and Assumption. I think those three schools are pretty much interchangeable. I mean, they are very similar and they attract the same kind of students. So if you have schools that are similar and attracting, your child, but giving different amounts, then you may want to go back and try to negotiate. Again, you want to do it before you deposit, usually sometime in March or April, so that you have a chance to make a decision. The other thing with the financial aid awards you have to be careful of is how much are they offering you in work study? Because you don't want your child working 25 hours a week. If you're only looking at the bottom line number on your financial aid awards, you could really, be duped, because the total amount here kind of looks the same, but what makes up that total amount is really important. Some schools will award what's called a Parent Plus loan. It's a loan from the federal government that the parents borrow and has an unlimited amount. You can borrow all that you need for 1 year. Some schools include that on your financial aid award, when it's really your decision of whether you want to borrow a loan, and you don't even know if you're going to get approved for this loan because there's a credit check involved. Or they include a very large work study amount, which is unrealistic. So look at that line by line and break it out. I always like to look at just tuition fees and room and board and subtract grants and scholarships. That's really all that counts, as far as what your bottom line is going to be. So you've got your awards, you've decided on a school, you pay a deposit by May 1st. May 1st is the universal deadline date to pay a deposit to tell a school you're coming. The deposit is usually $500, $800, maybe $1,000, and it's your first payment towards the fall semester. So it's not above and beyond the cost, it's your commitment that we're coming in the fall. So you pay that May 1st, and then the bill for the first semester comes out around July 1st. So you have, and it's due in August, so you have a couple months, May, June, July, to come up with how you're going to pay the balance for just the semester. They don't bill you for the whole school year, they do it semester by semester. So you might have some savings in the student's name, you might have some savings in the parent's name that you can pull from. You may have current cash flow that you can use to pay the school. I know when my twins went off to college, I didn't go grocery shopping for 3 weeks. I mean, the amount of money I saved once they left my house was, yes, I had this big college bill, but I was saving money because I wasn't feeding them, I wasn't paying for their sports and their scouts, and I wasn't driving them everywhere. My daughter played AAU basketball, which was not expensive to join the team, but the tournaments up and down the East Coast, we were staying in hotel rooms, we were eating out, we were driving everywhere. So there are expenses that you're paying now that you probably didn't plan for, but those are going to end. Come, June, July 1st of senior year, those are all going to end, and you may have more money in your cash flow than you realize that you could pay the school directly in a monthly payment plan. A majority of schools offer monthly payment plans that cost maybe $50 or $100 to join, but you take a portion of what you owe or all of what you owe for the year and pay on a monthly basis. They don't charge you any interest on the outstanding balance. So it's a way to kind of spread it out a little and get some relief that way, and not use up all your savings in one fell swoop. You can, keep it in the bank, keep it in investments so that it's earning money for you, and just pay them monthly. And then there are loans that you can borrow. So we talked about the federal student loan that has $5,500 for the student as a maximum, but there are federal loans for the parent to borrow that you can borrow the full amount. A parent can co-sign for their child on a private loan and get an interest rate based on their credit score, but both the student and the parent are on that loan. They can choose to defer payment on those loans until after the student graduates, but all of these loans, except for that subsidized student loan, all these other loan options you have are accruing interest while the student goes to school. So you may want to shop around for the best interest rate on a loan. Some people choose to do a home equity loan or a home equity line of credit to get a very low interest rate, but you're also putting your house on the line, so that's a personal question. So some other things to consider is, would a community college and transferring to a four-year school be an option to save a lot of money for the family? And you want to consider all 4 years or 5 years. A lot of kids are not graduating in 4 years. They may be taking 5 years. And then is your child in a path that, a career path that requires a master's degree? So what about that? Who's going to pay for that? How many other children do you have to put through school? So you may want to be very careful if you have a large family that you're not taking on too much loan debt with your oldest child if you have a lot of younger children coming up. You may want to think now, like, what is my credit score? Could I borrow? Do I want to borrow? Am I too close to retirement that I want to do this? Or as a parent, am I over 59 and a half and I could pull from my retirement to pay for college? And do I want to pull from my retirement to pay for my kids' college? So a lot of things to think about. In Massachusetts, there are a lot of options, inexpensive options for families. They have the mass transfer where they automatically will, a student graduating from a community college can automatically transfer into a four-year public and pay the community college rate at the four-year public if they graduate with a certain GPA. And then there are also tuition breaks at other New England schools for certain programs if the public schools in Massachusetts don't offer that program. So these are just some other options for you if you're looking for a very inexpensive option. So finally, this last section is just on some of the resources that are available to you. You can call the financial aid office at the college at any time. You're their customer. They're going to help you. So many people are worried about, I'm going to raise a red flag. They already can see everything on your FAFSA and your profile form. I don't know what else could be hiding. But, ask them. One of the big questions I get is, what about these private scholarships? Let's say we did get a financial aid package, but then we also got a $5,000 scholarship from a local community organization. Where does that go? You do need to notify the college that you're attending that you have outside scholarship money coming in. It can definitely go towards your unmet need if the school has not met 100% of your need. If they have met all of your need and the scholarship is above and beyond that, the school may alter their package. They might take away your loans or your work study to fit in this other scholarship. So you might end up with the same amount of money in the end, but it's better money because you're going to have more grants and scholarships and less loans and work study. So it's still a good idea to try to find these private scholarships. Make sure you're notifying the school of any circumstances. If you've applied and chose a school and then mom or dad loses their job, or is forced to go part-time instead of full-time, any changes like that that are affecting your income, again, the school won't know unless you tell them about it. And then, definitely attend their open house and any other orientation programs they have to ask all those final questions that you have. These are some resources available across Massachusetts. FAFSA Day is where you can get help filling out the FAFSA form. I just signed up myself as a volunteer. There's one at Worcester State. It's on a Saturday in November. And so other financial aid people like myself do presentations and sit down with you. They have them in the computer lab. So you bring all your documents, you sit down at the computer, you fill out the FAFSA form, and someone comes over and can check it with you before you, if you're worried about hitting that submit button. So some people do it at home and then come and log in and say, does this look right? And we say, yep, and you submit it and you're good to go. Mass Ed Co. is a great organization in Worcester that can help you if you have any specific questions. For certain families, they need extra help with the financial aid process. They can use that organization. Meifa also comes around in the spring, and we do after the college acceptance seminars. I don't know the exact date and time of any in this area. They will be promoted, and if you sign up for emails, you'll get an email about it. But it's like how to review your financial aid award, how to figure out how much you still owe as a balance, what your options are for paying that balance, what loans might be a good option for you. And then for now, you can sign up. You can go online and get an FSA ID for the student and a parent. Research, outside scholarships, deadline dates, forms required. Make sure your school list includes some safety schools where you might get merit aid. You can do net price calculators. So there's a lot of stuff to do. And you can keep in touch with Meifa on social media. We have all of these links here. And that is the presentation. I know it was so exciting. So are there any questions? Anyone going to be first? Yes.
Two questions.
Okay.
The first one you mentioned for filling out the FAFSA and CSS information, including private tuition for younger siblings. Does that include like daycare for a much younger sibling or daycare?
So the question was whether you could use daycare expenses as an exception, as a special circumstance. You can try. I think on the profile form it says, do you have any younger siblings attending K through 12 and paying private tuition? And then how much are you paying? But on the FAFSA form it doesn't mention it at all. So you could try that way. Yeah, daycare is very expensive. Daycare is as expensive as in-state public tuition. It's the same. You're paying for college now for a 2-year-old, yeah. So Social Security benefits are not reported for the student or the parent on the FAFSA form. Yep. You're welcome.
If in the last couple of years of their college, they participate in a co-op program, how is that funding, how is that money treated?
That's a good question, and my son went to Northeastern. He was in a co-op program, and so I didn't know before he went, and I had to research it myself. So a co-op program, the student receives payment. They leave school for 6 months and go and work. It gets subtracted. They do have to report it for tax purposes, so they're going to have to file a tax return for those years that they work, just like any other job. But then on the FAFSA form and the profile form, it will say, I'm trying to think of the language, but basically it backs out work-study earnings and co-op earnings. So it doesn't get counted, so it doesn't hurt you, which is great. When my son was on his co-ops, he paid his room and board with his co-op earnings, and there's no tuition charges while you're on a co-op because you're not earning any credit. That's the difference between a co-op and an internship. In an internship, you're earning credit, and sometimes you're getting paid. So an internship typically does affect your financial aid because you're getting paid for it, but you're also paying tuition at the same time. So you have to kind of get the language of whether it's an internship or a co-op.
Oh, hi. The combined parent income on your chart, is that the adjusted gross income on the 1040 tax return? Mostly?
Excellent question. It is the adjusted gross income from your 1040 tax return. The latest tax returns have gone through some changes recently, but usually it's the bottom line number on the first page is where it used to be, your adjusted gross income. But then again, they also ask you about untaxed income. So I think we have one over here.
You have all of
So the question was older children in grad school. Yes, you can count them in school if you're paying for them. If you're supporting them, you can count them in your family and count them as being in school. Even if they're not dependents on the tax form. So there's two questions on the forms. One is how many exemptions do you have on your tax return? And the other one is how many people do you have in your family? Those two numbers don't have to match. And they're two separate questions. Any other questions?
My husband was thinking of, retiring this year, but he's wondering if, because of the IAP payment that would be coming through, if that would negatively affect our ability to get financial aid.
So your child's a senior?
Yeah, he is.
Okay. And the IAP, is it like his pension?
Yeah.
Okay. So two things there. We get this a lot, that, a lot of parents are approaching retirement and they're like, should I just retire while my kid goes to college and I might get more financial aid or it might hurt me? We're not sure. Mm-hmm. So number one, your financial aid is going to be based on what you earned in 2018. So it's not going to factor in his current situation until the child is applying for financial aid for junior year.
Okay.
And then those IAP, anything you pull from your 401k or your pension plan typically is taxable. It's going to show up in your tax return. It's going to be reported. But most people in retirement are making less money than they were while they were employed. So it may help you to qualify for more financial aid when they report his retirement income. But I don't think it would hurt you.
Okay, that's what he was wondering.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Everyone's going to go retire tomorrow. Yeah.
Hello, I was wondering if colleges provide the information on the total cost of attendance. I haven't seen that on websites necessarily.
Yeah, it's like everything else on the college website that's important. They bury it with, with a bunch of pretty pictures and videos. I would do a search directly for cost of attendance budget. I think, some of the public schools where they have in-state and out-of-state pricing, and then they have, nurses might pay one price and engineering majors might pay another price. It's a little hard to find your cost of attendance for your specific situation. But, what I use is the College Board website, collegeboard.org. You search for a particular college. Several pages will come up as an option. One of them is paying. And if you click on the paying option, it brings up the cost of attendance that the school has published to the College Board website. It's not specific for any one major, but it's like their prices for next fall that or their current prices. And then the other thing to factor in is that a lot of colleges don't have next year pricing until March. Most colleges publish their next year's prices in March. So you can go based on what it costs now, but you might not know what next year is going to cost until March or April. Okay. She's coming with
Thank you. Can you comment on early decision and quote-unquote negotiating your financial aid package? It seems to me, because it is binding, you really lose any negotiating power. It's whatever they give you, they give you. You cannot say, oh, but if you give me more, I'll go. And
right.
I assume they let you pull out if you cannot pay. But
right. So early decision is a way of applying for admission where you're telling the school, if you accept me, I'm coming. You're my first choice. I'm not going to apply. And you can probably answer more of this. But it is binding, meaning that if they accept you, you have to come. I would never do early decision unless I've done the net price calculator on that college website and you're happy with the results. If you really want to compare financial aid awards, you really want to shop around and potentially negotiate, early decision is not for you, because schools will let you out of an early decision agreement if you say finances are an issue, but they're going to say, well, why didn't you do our net price calculator? You knew what the results were. So I see a lot of people doing early decision and trying to back out of it later, and that's not what it was intended for, and it makes the guidance counselor look bad, it makes the student look bad, it just kind of messes up the whole process. Unless you want to add anything to that. Yeah.
Hi. What if you have a child that's considering deferring? He's choosing to apply. I'm making him. I want to try to understand the financial aid package. Does that automatically carry over if he does defer? And what about the Abigail Adams and Koplik scholarships? Do they carry over, or do you lose it if you don't go right after?
Right. So the question is on deferring and what happens to your financial aid. So your need-based financial aid will not automatically carry over. If you get a need-based financial aid package for next fall, but then they defer for a year, you have to reapply. If your finances stay the same, you know, your income's the same, your family situation is the same, then you may be able to get a commitment from the school to say, if everything stays the same, you'll get the same package. But if your income goes up $10,000 between 2018 and 2019, you might get a little less financial aid. Merit-based aid is a whole nother thing. You would have to ask them if they would honor it a year from now. I've seen some schools say yes, I've seen other schools say no. As far as the John and Abigail Adams scholarship, I don't know. I would assume that they would. I think that you can get that even if you don't enroll right away.
I'd have to look that up specifically, because it typically is that you're utilizing it right out of high school. So I would have to check on that, because it's my understanding that you utilize it right out of high school your first year in, but we can double check on that. You work with Andrea, right? Yeah, we'll check on that, okay?
Yes. So how does early action affect the size of the award? I haven't seen any discrepancies between early action and regular for financial aid awards. More and more kids are applying early action, and then the schools are accepting more and more kids through early action, so they may not, I don't know, they may not have as many spots left for regular, which might mean that fewer kids get scholarships for regular, but no school is coming out and saying that. No college is saying, you know, apply early action, you'll get more money. They're all saying, nope, you'll get the same amount of money whether you're applying early action or regular. I think the only change would be is if they got so many great kids early action and they offered them a ton of scholarship money, that when your kid shows up on regular and they're not as fabulous as all those kids who applied early, they may not. But the thing is, they haven't deposited yet. So the school's offered them all this money, but the school doesn't know who's coming until May 1st. So the school just keeps offering money, hoping that these kids are gonna deposit. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. The only other thing is that some of the funding, if you qualify for need-based aid, some schools run out of some of their need-based aid, and it is kind of a first-come, first-served basis. But if you meet all the deadline dates, you should have no problem. It's those kids who, you know, don't do the FAFSA form until March 1st or something who might miss out. Have you seen anything, Lisa, with early action? Yeah. Oh, there's a question in the back.
So 2 questions, one based on a comment you just made. If schools are offering, you know, aid and then less people accept the aid, is there an opportunity to go back and ask for aid again after that May deadline?
Not typically after the May deadline, but I have seen families who have gone to a school like April 1st and said, you know, is there anything else you can do for us? We're still trying to make up our mind. We have got better offers. And they say, nope, we've got no other money for you. And then the school calls the student April 28th. Hey, you still considering us? We found some more money. So there are schools who are scrambling towards the end of April. So I tell families, don't deposit till May 1st, because they may come back to you if you wait long enough. And some, you know, it's not the highly desirable schools, the schools that have a very low acceptance rate and get a ton of they get a ton of applications. It's not those. It's the schools that are scrambling to get their class to come in, who may have money up until the end of April.
And then my next question is, how much can we expect the average cost of tuition to increase on an annual basis?
Good question. So tuition and room and board has increased about 3%. If you wanted to do a forecast, I would use 3% across the board year after year. And that's another thing, is that typically some schools will make up the difference of that increase year after year. But you'll notice that on the student loan goes from $5,500 to $6,500 to $7,500. So a lot of times your financial aid might stay the same and the student will get a little bit more loan, but the cost of the school went up 3% or 4%. So sometimes by senior year, you still have a good portion of the cost covered, but a higher percentage of it is covered with a student loan because of that student loan increase. All right. Well, thank you very much. This has been a great audience. If you have the survey form, you can leave it out front on the table where we had the handouts, and if you want extras, there's some left there. Thank you very much.